It's bonus episode time, baby. Yeah, we're doing, last time we talked about Halloween. This time we're talking about some of our favorite horror movies. An election happened. I'm happy about it. Get him out. Get him out.
We'll talk more about that on an official episode.
We won't. I'm saying it right now. Get him out, and that's all I have to say about it. I'm happy. The true horror movie is over. Now we can talk about this other bullshit.
Ghouls and goblins. The White House is supposed to be very haunted.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, bonus episode. We're just going to talk horror movies for 30 minutes. Just have a good time. We'll go back and forth talking about some of our favorites, why they're our favorites.
Maybe some of our least favorites as well that we just think are the movies that
just whatever
aren't good.
Runs off. Real quick, I decided to watch a new horror movie last night, something that popped up on Netflix called His House. Mm-hmm. And it is, I don't have the director off the top of my head.
That's fine.
It's a BBC kind of production. And essentially, it is about a Sudanese couple who obviously survived the disastrous war situation in Sudan, make it onto a refugee boat and make it to Europe and end up in England. Along the way, it appears that they've lost their daughter in the sea. So tragedy kind of follows them. And as part of the refugee sort of placement thing, they get put in a house on a limited budget, and it's like, keep the house clean, do whatever you want, and all that. If you don't do things right or everything, we're just gonna deport you. And so it's got that menace behind it, like just the displacing of people who are already displaced into whatever. Mm-hmm. And they're given like a big house, like a rundown house, but it's a big house. Like all these agents and everything, there's also a bigger house than mine. And so they're all just kind of like suspiciously looking at it, but you better not screw this up. Matt Smith is in it. He plays
I know who Matt Smith is.
Yeah, he plays their like sort of contact with the government, and he's essentially like saying
he's the man that was going to be the young emperor in Rise of Skywalker, but is now not that.
Well, and probably most importantly, he was Doctor. He was the Doctor in Doctor Who.
Yeah, he was Doctor Who. Yeah,
and he's in a great deleted scene in Bruges where he plays a young Ray Fiennes and he cuts a guy's head off.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It's a deleted scene.
I can see him as a young Ray Fiennes.
Yeah, he's pretty fun. I like Matt Smith a lot.
Fiennes. I would say Ray Fiennes, but like Rafe.
It's Rafe.
Rafe Fiennes.
Ralph. And essentially they move into this house and...
Is the house haunted?
It is. But what is it haunted by? Something they brought with them.
Crushing power of the state.
Or the guilt related to things they've done themselves, or just the pressure of all these eyes looking at them. In Matt Smith's terms, they want him, hey, be one of the good ones, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're always like, we can't go back, we can't screw this up, we're going to go back. And then what appears to be talking to them and viewing them as like, you don't belong here, you lied, there's something you're hiding. And it's very creepy. It's a very well-told ghost story. It's got some really good twists, 2 really great performances, and it's a unique point of view from a couple of characters that you don't usually get their point of view as the main characters, refugees.
Yeah.
So I think over time that will be seen as a more iconic horror movie. It's got some really scary ghosts. It's got some great little earned jump scares and things. It's pretty solid. His House. I recommend it.
All right. Okay.
I watched it up until a point last night because I started at like 1 o'clock in the morning, so I was like, I can't finish this.
Okay.
And then I woke up this morning and watched the rest of it. Yeah, watch it in one go. It's more effective.
Before we started this episode, we were talking about Indiana Jones and playing with archetypes in like a sense of like Indiana Jones is a serial character. Mm-hmm. That they sort of built a movie around, and all the tropes of serials are sort of in there.
In another adventure of Indiana Jones.
I'd like to talk about some movies that I think do the same thing for horror, but they take an idea that might seem silly or antiquated or old, but they kind of nail it. There's a couple of them I have, but we'll go back and forth. But my first one is Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah.
I think not only is this a great horror movie because it takes itself the exact right amount of serious. Because back in the day, you'd watch like 40s or 50s black and white kind of horror serials or whatever.
Most like road horrors. Like
and they would be like
post-Psycho.
Yeah, and they would kind of be something like, be careful, they're out there, they can smell fear just by looking at you. They can say something like that. And then it feels like someone was like, what happens if you take that idea seriously?
Well, then you get like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which Jeepers Creepers takes from very strongly, at least in terms of atmosphere.
You talked about it's a dirty, grungy, rusty South setting that you like a lot.
I love that.
Where you drive by a shack and you're like, what's in that shack?
What's in that shack? What is he building in there?
But I love the idea. One, I think monster movies are better than a lot of B Fangoria like bargain bin slasher movies that are a dime a dozen. I want more cool monster movies, and I think Jeepers Creepers has a really cool one.
Well, and also it has a monster that also is a slasher. Like
that goes.
He gets to do both.
Yeah,
and so that's but he's. I like the lore behind him.
Me too.
I like when they go to that church and go in there and they see the walls just covered in bodies and everything.
Oh, it's not a church. It's at the bottom. I know what you're talking about. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember the show Ed, Ed, and Eddie?
Yeah.
There's a great episode of Ed, Ed, and Eddie where Ed pretends to be the dumb, tall Ed.
Yeah.
Pretends to be...
Single D.
Yeah, he pretends to be a horror monster.
Yes, I think I remember
He
this
makes
one.
him a big, cool, dragony, tentacly thing, and he takes the children of the cul-de-sac and he takes them into a cave where he sticks them on the walls with chunky puffs. And because they're playing like hide and go monster or whatever,
right?
And he takes like a method actor. He takes it real seriously.
He zones in. They're like, we have to stop him.
And he puts off, and the one who stops him is his sister by just taking off the mask. And he's like, oh, I need like a butter toast then. And he goes back to whatever he was doing before. But he puts them all onto the Sistine Chapel of Macabre.
Yeah,
his cave.
It predates Hannibal.
Yeah, and I genuinely was like, it feels like they took even like those ideas. Like, what if they did have a killer who like stitches you into the wall so he can look at this big tapestry, whatever. Even little things like that. For some reason, even though they sound cliche now, it was kind of scary, and not just scary, but weirdly fun and interesting.
Yeah, I need to watch Jeepers Creepers again. I saw both of them.
I even like the second one, even though it becomes a little more action-y. It kind of becomes a little bit more about like action and set pieces than about like.
Because if I remember correctly, that's about like
they're on a bus.
It's a bunch of football kids being besieged by the creature, and then there's like a Van Helsing like guy who's like hunting them down.
That's the opening of the second one is the scariest part of both movies. I haven't seen the third one. I know there's a third one. Some people liked it.
Doesn't it come after his son? Is that what it is?
Well, what happens is at the beginning, it opens in a cornfield. First of all, that dirty rural South setting is very
Which I think this
effective.
is more of a Midwestern. I think it's supposed to be set in Indiana or
something
like
Kansas or something.
Yeah, it's a Rust Belt horror sort of deal.
And he's on. You don't know it, but the kid is putting up scarecrows because the crows are eating their corn or whatever. And there's just the way it plays with like the atmosphere.
Oh, I remember because they run into it and there's a scarecrow that shouldn't be there. Yeah, okay.
And the kid, so and as he's putting up one here, in this peripheral vision, he sees one out there, and it looks at him, and then as he looks at it, it looks away. Creepy as fuck.
Really good.
And then as he sees its feet, its clawed feet, and he sees it twitch a little bit, he runs. And then as he runs, it just launches. It's like a big kind of slightly VFX shot where he jumps further than a human being could, and you hear the kid scream, and he just tackles him down into the tall corn. You don't see anything below that. You just see him pounce on the kid.
Because the thing about the creeper is, for anyone who's not seen it, he takes, when he comes back every
23 years.
23 years.
Which is another thing that kind of crops up. Every 23 years, he comes back.
Right.
Which is a thing that happens in some other horror movies. I think It.
Yeah, it's every 90-something years or every 67 years.
Well, in the new one, I think it is literally 23 years or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's coming back after X amount of time is another horror trope that gets played with.
Right.
In this
it builds
movie.
the stakes. Is like now is the time.
Yeah.
But what a thing is, he comes back much like the Mummy. He comes back incomplete and has to devour or steal parts from other people in order to restore himself.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing about Jeepers Creepers is he wants to get Justin Lang's eyes.
Justin Long's eyes.
Who
delivers a great performance in that movie.
Yeah, I forgot who plays his sister in it.
I can't remember her too. She hadn't done anything since that movie. She came back for the third one or whatever. I think it's like something Phillips or whatever.
Either way, but it's because they were just like on a road trip, and then he shows up in his big. He's also one of the few slashers that has a van. He's got this scary looking killer van
that's been souped up so it goes 3,000 miles an hour or something.
Did you know that the story story of Jeepers Creepers was based on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, I didn't know
I
this.
saw this. Like, so there was reference. I watched the episode, and essentially it was about like a pair of siblings who were driving like from a concert or somewhere in the early morning, and they saw somebody like off in the woods in like an abandoned place, like dragging a body. It looks like a body in white and taking it down a chute. And they got the cops involved, and
Which
they
happens
found,
in the movie.
Yeah, they got the cops involved, and the cops found like a body dump. They didn't find out who did it. They think it was probably something like mafia related or something like that. But that image apparently was just like that inspired the movie.
Yeah. Even in the first one, when they drive past him and he just drops a body down a chute and he sees them and he just watches them as they drive away. It's very ominous.
Yeah, it's got one I want to go back to.
It's good stuff. I'll have it downstairs. I'll let you borrow it if you want. I have both of them downstairs. And I love that. But even let me get back to that opening scene real quick. So as that happens, the dog starts barking, and the dad and his older brother walk out to the cornfield, and they notice like an eerie silence, and then you see pieces of corn and clothes being thrown up in the air, and he starts screaming, and then they haul ass out to the field to get him, and right as they're about to get him, he just takes off with his wings, and you hear their son screaming in the distance as he flies completely visibly. Like, it's not like he's gone. Like, you just see him flying towards the sunset, and your son is gone forever.
Yeah.
And I can't think of a better horror opening than that. Like, it's really fucking effective. That's the second one.
Yeah, that's the second one.
But and the second one I think is less good than the first one. But I think that is better than anything in all those movies because it's really good.
Because there's another scene in the first one I remember real well, which is like when they find that old lady's house.
That's good.
And it's all very quiet, and she's giving it sass and everything because it's like eating her cats and things or something. I can't recall.
So I remember the scene. So after, I think what happens is the creeper or whatever, like he sees them and he follows them and torments them or whatever, and they get to like, I don't know, like some sort of, they find a place to stop at, and they decide if they should go back to that chute and look for, he says, well, what if it was me stuck down there? Would you want to just leave me there? So he manages to moralize his way, which is really dumb. Just call the cops, have them go look at it. Or I guess this is another thing. The setting. This is set in like the 70s. No cell phones.
Yeah,
so they can't call the cops or whatever.
It's vaguely a period piece.
Yeah. So they go back. Justin Long goes down and he sees just a tapestry of macabre, of a Sistine Chapel of dead bodies stitched together. And he sees even one. There's like an urban legend of these two high school sweethearts that disappeared, and he finds them with their hands together or whatever. So that like it really fucks him up, and they get to the diner or whatever that he's freaked the fuck out. So they drive to the diner to call the police or whatever. And so while they're there, he finds them or whatever. And some lady comes over and says, "Is that your car out front?" And he goes, because someone was in it. And they go out there and their clothes are everywhere. And he goes, he was holding it up to his face, just sniffing it in. Like, it seemed like he really liked it. And he walked away. Then there's the psychic lady who they call, who knows what's happening. Feels kind of superfluous to the plot to a degree.
It's been so long. I only remember.
There's a psychic lady who goes, "Have you heard the song yet?" or whatever. But so they eventually the cops come there, and they're waiting for the cops are gonna follow them back or something so they can be safe or whatever. And then this is a great scene where he hears the song and he goes, "Oh, she told me when I heard the song we'd be in trouble."
Is it the Jeepers Creepers?
Yes.
Where'd you get them papers?
Yeah, and then as it's a close up of them in their car. And through the back window, you see the cop car, and he lands on top of it.
Yeah, it takes that axe out.
And his wings just spread out. And I was like, fucking A, dude.
That's the first time you see that he's not human.
Yeah.
Like, for the most part, you don't really see that he's a creature. You just like, that's one jacked-looking weird demon guy.
Yeah.
And then you see his wing spreads. Like, that's not a person.
Kills both the cops.
Yeah.
And eats their eyes.
Yeah, and his tongue, too, doesn't he? He just take his tongue out and everything?
Because he needs, and that's the thing that you want. Like, what he wants to do is he makes you afraid. Because when he makes you afraid, afraid your body emits the pheromone, and he can smell if there's anything inside of you that he'd like to get his hands on, like your eyes, your heart, your lungs, whatever.
It's a really great creature.
Yeah.
It's a really great creature.
And then we get to the next part, which is what you were just talking about. They run him over or whatever. Or I think that might happen.
They run him
later.
over several times because I remember when he's like on the ground, one of his wings pops back out, like a bird that fell out of the sky.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
So then we get to the lady's house, and it's a really great scene. He's like, "Oh, someone's after us, and we need to use your phone." She's like, "It's a wonderfully crazy lady," and then. They look back out there and like he's like, "Oh, is that my scarecrow?" And she goes, "That's not my scarecrow." And you can see him just sort of standing there, statuesque. And she comes out just like a good Midwest lady with a fucking sawed-off 8-gauge or some shit. If I could take like a fucking melon-sized chunk out of anything, tells him to get the fuck out of there. Instead of just running right at them, he runs and he jumps over them into the house.
Yeah.
And you hear the cats and all the stuff, and she goes in there and you hear dead silence, and you hear bam, 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 or whatever, and then dead silence. And you see her come out, but he's actually holding her body up so it looks like her. But he's holding her whole body up as he walks out with her, and then he just drops her, whatever. And you see his face for the first time, and he smiles. I love this. I love the don't worry about it. Like of this movie. Is he human? Is he not? Well, he's humanoid. Yeah. Like in a way that.
But it's more like, what is he, a demon? Is he just some cryptid? He's like a Mothman. Is he an alien?
But he obviously he feels
it's just some mid-American monster.
Yeah, he feels joy.
Yeah.
In a way,
he gets pleasure from fear. He's evil, and he's intentionally enjoys evil.
Yeah. And at the end of the movie, he gets Justin Long, takes him back to his warehouse, and just eats his eyes.
Yeah, it's that great scene where you see the camera turns around, and you just see through Justin Long's head.
Yeah, so he ate out the back of his head, too.
And then he leans in, and you see him looking with his eyes through his eye sockets.
Yeah. Justin Long does come back for the second one.
He's a ghost.
As an apparition
or
whatever.
An eyeless ghost in that.
Yeah.
It's pretty creepy. He gets some creepy shots in that.
A few more minutes, then we'll move on to one of yours.
Because I got a small little addendum to a movie similar to this that came out around the same time.
Okay, great. The weapons are really great. In fact, in the second one, at the opening of the movie, he takes his son off into the sunset or whatever, he leaves a knife behind, and on that knife is a picture of it's really old, and there's a picture of farm people running away from the sun as the creeper blots out the sun and chases them in these fields, implying that he's been doing this for thousands of years.
Yeah, he's been doing this for a very long time.
That's that kind of mythos I really appreciate, and he uses these throwing stars and these knives and these weapons that are really cool.
These, intricate, and he's clearly designed them all himself.
One is made out of Justin Long's belly, because he has a little tattoo on his belly button in the first one, and that you see that knife in the second one with his belly button on the shuriken or whatever.
God.
And eventually what happens is the dad comes back from the beginning of the second movie,
and he's become Ahab. He's essentially
he's got a big harpoon gun, and he's got a post puncher that they're using, and he attached the knife that the creeper dropped. I love that final act. It's really good because the creeper loses his arm and his leg, and he's after there's an African American quarterback character, and he's been crippled because the creeper comes at him full speed, flying 300 miles an hour, and just rams their truck, and just they all get flown out. He gets thrown out of the bed of the truck, probably 50 feet, breaks his leg so he can't run. So he's crawling away from him as the creature is hurling himself 10 feet at a time with one arm and one leg, trying to get him.
Like a cricket.
It's fucking good, man.
Yeah,
and at the end, the Ahab comes back, and he takes him, and he picks up that knife, and he just stabs him over and over again with the rage of a father that lost his son. Just keeps doing it, and he's not dead. He even gets him in his head, and the creature still comes alive and tries to yank it out.
Oh, I think I remember what.
And
I
then
remember how it ends now.
It ends. The 23 years are over because it's set during the same time period as the Justin Long, the first movie.
Right.
That's at the beginning of his 23 days every 23 years.
Yeah, 23 days every 23 years.
And this one is at the end.
Right.
And you see his little cocoon go back up, and he just takes the body, puts it in his barn and waits for 23
3
years.
more
And
years.
these douchebag frat boys or whatever come by and be like, "Is this thing real? It looks kind of like bullshit or whatever." And he goes, "What are you doing?" And one of them comes over there and tries to touch it, and he goes, "We don't touch it." And the great crumpety old man voice, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "Oh, just waiting." And he goes, "For what?" And he goes, "Hey," there's a long silence, and he goes, "About 2 more days, give or take a day or two."
Oh.
It's fucking good.
Yeah.
And like that's like it's a good movie, man.
Because then it becomes like it establishes that this is a thing that has gone 23 years beyond, and now it's become local legend, and everyone knows.
Yeah,
what
the
it
bat
is.
from hell or whatever they call
Yeah.
it. And I don't.
Which
I
that's the
didn't-
thing I do like in talking about tropes. I like is when society accepts the supernatural thing, and it's not like that's not real. Like they're just like, no, it's real. I like that. I like it's just like there's no denial.
Well, the kids don't think it's real. They think it's fake.
They think it's like a Ripley's Believe It or Not, or like Bat Boy from the National Enquirer sort of
or
deal.
some shit like that. So you said you had one you wanted to talk about, kind of related.
I don't
to
want to talk about it too much, but it's very similar to that vibe, and that's the movie Frailty.
Frailty.
So Frailty is also a period piece.
Sounds familiar, but I can't remember.
It's Matt McConaughey and Bill Paxton. And it came out like 1999. It was a big HBO movie, very similar to like Jeepers Creepers was kind of an HBO or Cinemax movie that played pretty frequently. And what it is Matt McConaughey is now older. Like he's a young man in his 20s, and he goes to the police and says, "I want to tell you the story of my father. My father was this famous axe murderer." And it cuts back to when him and his brother were children. And so, because the axe murdering's been happening, and he's like, "It's my brother, and I want to tell you why. Is because it's my father. And when we were kids, our mother died and everything. We lived on a farm and everything, and all of a sudden, Bill Paxton, the father, has this revelation from God that shows him to an axe and says, 'You must go and kill sinners.'" And so it is this dark, kind of noir, Southern Rust Belt Gothic story of Matt McConaughey recounting his childhood with his father, who was an axe murderer. And it's good. It's real. It got a lot of people looking back at it after Paxton died a few years ago.
Yeah. So Paxton plays the dad.
Yeah, Paxton's lead in this, and McConaughey is he's got 2 sons, and he's one of the older sons, and he's recounting everything to a police officer who's Powers Booth, and all the while he's like, "I'm going to take you to the old barn." It's like the Frame story. He's like, "I'm going to take you to the old barn and give you the evidence that my father was involved with all those killings." And while he's taking him there, it flashes back to his father being like, "I'm doing the Lord's work," and he's like, "I can see sinners, and I have to kill them in the name of God." And it's this really kind of like very small, very focused little story about one man's madness, supernatural madness. And there's like these great shots, like where he has like these dream sequences where he's like got angel wings and all these other things, and it's really weird and fun. I highly recommend it. It's good early McConaughey performance.
Yeah. Pre-Reign of Fire era.
Yeah, pre-Reign of Fire, but after Contact.
Yeah.
Yeah, solid movie. Frailty.
What is it that reminded you of this about it?
It's same of that rusty, dark, gritty turn of the century. I mean, by turn of the millennium, horror movie that kind of feels out of nowhere, like influenced by nothing in particular, but seems so specific. Like it kind of has that same vibe, that kind of like when it's night, it's very night and very black. And
Yeah.
when and everything's, like one of the main characters might as well be this axe. This like perfect axe. It's like one of the best axes. And it's just a silver bladed thing. And the way that Bill Paxton's character talks about it is like, "I'm like the Archangel Michael. Like I'm the vengeance." And
I love a good madman.
yeah, it's a good madman, like religious madman performance.
So let's talk about one of yours that you wanted to talk about.
I would be remiss not to talk about one of my favorites because I have a lot of interesting feelings about this movie, and it's Poltergeist.
I've never seen Poltergeist. So you're gonna have to give me the pitch.
Giant quote unquote Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist. Tobe Hooper directed
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He directed several other of the movies. And then while Spielberg was working on...
Although, a little quick trivia, Matthew McConaughey is in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Yes,
movie.
he is. He's in Next Generation.
Yeah.
And so is from what's her name from? I can't remember her. She's an Australian actress. It was in Cold Mountain.
Nicole Kidman.
No, Renee Zellweger.
Renee Zellweger. She's not Australian. She's American.
Okay, yeah. Well, wrong. Renee Zellweger is in that one too.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of her first performances as well. Was Texas Generation. Texas. I think it's the third one.
Yeah.
Because the second one has Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the third one. Yeah, so I think that is called The Next Generation. I don't recall. It's Deep Space Nine. Star Trek. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Deep Space Nine.
So give me the skinny on Poltergeist.
Oh my gosh, this movie's so good.
It's about a haunting.
It is about a haunting. It is set in the most idyllic, perfect Southern California suburb. Mm-hmm. I should note this. Tobe Hooper is supposed to be the director of this. I will contend to the end of days Spielberg directed this movie. It feels like a Spielberg movie. It acts like a Spielberg movie. John Williams' score in it is very much a Spielberg movie. Watch this movie when you get a chance. And just think Spielberg, because he was on set the whole time. Tobe Hooper is listed as director. It doesn't feel like a Tobe Hooper movie. It feels like Spielberg directed this also, like at least because he says I just wrote the script and left it alone.
Okay.
So
Spielberg helped write it.
Yes, I believe so. I believe he helped write the script, but he was the producer. It's an Amblin picture. I think he's like, he was working on Last Crusade at the time.
Okay.
And was like, all right, whatever. But I think he directed this movie secretly.
Well, producers can have a lot of influence on a movie.
Well, this movie had a lot of Spielberg influence.
So
So
definitely possible. I mean, Dread was directed by Pete Travis, or was it?
Right.
Because Carl Urban says kind of was Alex Garland directing the whole thing.
And
So,
I consider that an Alex Garland directed
Yeah.
film, pretty much. So it is set in
California suburb.
small California suburbs, recently developed. Craig T. Nelson and Joe Beth Williams are this not young couple. Their relationship's really interesting. It's one of my favorite little just like married couples in a movie because it's clear that he's older, she's younger. They've had 3 children over a series of time. He works in real estate. She's kind of like a stay-at-home mom. They're just sort of like the Reagan era, low-key ideal, and like when no one's looking, they just shut the door, let their kids go to bed, and they sit around, smoke weed, talk about politics, and fuck. Like they got this really great sort of situation going on.
Cool.
Until their youngest daughter, Carol Ann, starts talking about seeing people and hearing voices from the television. And they slowly start watching all this poltergeist activity start taking place. It's very slow and like a chair will move across the kitchen floor. And eventually, like Joe F. Williams, the mother, is like able to like see it. And she's like, you got to watch this happen. We're going to put this stool here. And at first it's kind of whimsical. And they're like, what is this? This is really interesting. And they start asking around like, what's going on? And then the stakes get raised when the violence of whatever this entity is really shows itself and tries to attack the family and pulls Carol Ann into its dimension. And they're like, she's in the house, but we can't get her. Cut to them going to paranormal researchers and like, you guys got to figure out what's going on. And then they bring in the late Zelda Rubinstein as the psychic, and one of the more iconic characters. She comes in talking, Carol Ann, are you in this house? And it's a great performance, 10 out of 10. She's spectacular. And it's essentially becomes half a horror movie, half a family drama, and half, I would almost say, a supernatural adventure. And it's that Spielberg element that doesn't make it just a horror movie. It's got so much heart, and everyone is so emotionally connected. It's one of the most emotionally connective horror movies you ever see. It's just when it turns into a horror movie, it turns into a horror movie.
Yeah.
There are visions of a guy ripping his face off, the ghost, like the entities that they
Do
build.
we ever see the entity? Does it take a conscious form?
It takes all kinds of different forms.
Okay.
By the end of the movie, like, coffins are shooting out of the ground, and like skeletons are coming up from the pool in the backyard, and a portal to another world opens up. It goes balls to the wall by the end of the movie, and it's great. I saw it a lot when I was a kid. It scared the shit out of me a lot, and I think I watch it every year. Okay. And to me, I've had some people say, well, it's not perfect. It's got these things. And I'm like, I think it's a little slow at times, and it's very 80s, but I think it's really timeless. And the whole twist of it is, without giving away too much, is that the father, Craig T. Nelson, discovers that his boss was like, hey, you got a really great setting here. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm having a really hard time. And it's like, oh, well, we just moved, like, the thing. And he's like, well, wasn't there a cemetery here? And there's a great shot where they're overlooking the valley, where they see all the houses, and the camera slowly turns, and they're at a cemetery, an old cemetery on a hill, and it's a matte painting. Like, it just looks creaky and almost like a Western cemetery. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, we're going to move these too and build a new subdivision here. And he's like, so you moved the graves, but you left the bodies. And he's like, yeah, right down there in Bella Vista. And that's when he realizes they built the whole suburbs underneath cemeteries.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
And that's what leads everything to and they have reached out through this little girl, through Carol Ann, as a like empathetic, pure reconnaissance agent in order to get back into our world. Oh. So there is an evil entity, but Zelda Rubinstein playing Tangela, the medium, the psychic, mm-hmm. delivers these beautiful things about like there are two planes of existence. Your daughter is in their plane, and her life force is so strong that they feel like they have to come to her. But there is an evil entity that is confusing her and them against you, mm-hmm. and we have to beat it. And it is a heart on its sleeve thriller against evil that is also really creepy. But at the same, like, yeah, I know I'm running long on it, but I love this movie. I love it.
Sounds fun. I'll have to definitely check it out for sure.
It's definitely a great watch. It's a good like family watch too. Like it's just kind of scary. Like it was that great 80s like we can do whatever we want kind of thing. So if we wanted to show a scene of a man ripping his face off as a nightmare sequence and it's gory as all get out, you can do that in a PG movie.
This is I'm going to segue off of this because talking about psychics and mediums, mm-hmm. there's a lot of those in horror movies. And there's a really particularly great scene with one from a man who's done a lot of great horror movies, Sam Raimi. And I'm not going to talk about Evil Dead. I want to talk about Drag Me to Hell.
A Drag Me to Hell, a movie I also haven't seen, but I hear people say I'd love it to death.
I'll give you... It's so stylish, mm-hmm. and it's gross.
I dig.
And it's gross on purpose. They make I can't remember the name of the actress in it. She's been in a few things. She was in like one of those like the horse movie Flicka or whatever, like one of those movies.
Because I
yeah, look it up. She's like a blonde-haired actress. Justin Long is in it as well. He turns out another great performance. The guy from Inception, the Indian man who they go to get their sedatives from, he's in it. Mm-hmm. There's another. I forget the name of the psychic lady who's in it.
Alison Lohman.
Alison Lohman.
Yeah, Alison Lohman.
Yeah. She's in it, and she plays this very well-meaning kind of girl who just wants to have a perfect boyfriend and get rid of her southern accent a little bit so mm-hmm. she can kind of move on in the world. She's doing, the first scene we see with her, she's doing tapes in her car, the rice on the ice tastes nice kind of stuff, trying to get rid of that or whatever.
Right.
She works at a bank. There's a position open for like an assistant regional manager. She wants that, but there's another dickhead who's coming out who, takes the boss to Lakers games or whatever, and he's a real piece of shit. And she's trying to prove herself. And also the movie opens with a boy in Mexico who has been cursed. And and at the end of the curse, you get drugged to hell is the mm-hmm. the main idea of the movie.
They'll drag you into hell.
Yeah, and you see his shadow at the end, where like this woman this old psychic tries to help this boy, and I think it appears that she somehow I can't remember exactly how, but she's too late, and you see the shadow of the boy's hand get grabbed by other creatures and drugged down. And when it's a very stylish movie, it looks real good, and like Sam Raimi has a weird fun flair with like great tense horror. Cool, like he knows how to. Sam Raimi's a great director. He knows how to shoot a movie. Well, in a lot of ways.
I was thinking the other day about Peter Jackson because I was reminded of some of his early movies, like Meet the Feebles and Brain Dead. Yeah, and it's like that guy went on to do
Lord of the Rings and
but
King
Sam
Kong.
Raimi also was the guy who pushed the limits with Evil Dead and things like that, and then went on to do Spider-Man.
Yeah, Drag Me to Hell. It's great seeing Sam Raimi do a horror movie after he's had big success.
Yeah,
that's my biggest thing about this. So I'll get back to the story. This girl. The manager's trying to figure out who he wants to pick for this manager job. He's kind of leaning toward the other dickhead because he's a dickhead who will kind of kiss his ass or whatever.
Yeah.
And eventually we get to I don't know who her name is. She's basically Madame Zeroni from Holes. She's an old gypsy woman.
Right.
And she talks like this. And she has this gross...
Just like an extra from Thinner.
Yeah, she has these big, long claw nails. And it's a great introduction to the character. Because she is ostensibly a nice lady. Mm-hmm. She doesn't seem to be evil, but she has a weird discolored eye. She's kind of like an old woman coughing up mucus into a handkerchief. She's the hag, in that sense. But she seems to be a well-meaning, and she's fallen behind on one of her payments. She's not reached her. She's already reached her maximum number of payment deferments or whatever, so she has to get permission from the bank. And when we meet her, we see Alison Lohman looking over it. Then you hear. And you look down, you see this lady's claws at her desk, just waiting to talk to you. We didn't even see her get there.
Right.
And it's Sam Raimi kind of being like, it doesn't matter. We don't need to see her sit down. You get it. Like he always has a half a wink at the audience the whole movie, which I really appreciate. So the lady says, like, well, I've fallen behind on my payments for the house, and if you guys can just give me a little bit of time, my daughter's going to come down, and she's actually going to help me pay for it. And she goes, I don't know. I'd have to speak to my manager. She goes, well, could you? I'd really appreciate it. And she gets up and she goes to the manager, and the manager goes, she's had 3 deferments, and she said she's just had some time. She's had some sickness problems lately, but she's doing a lot better now. Do you think we could give her an extension? He goes, I'll tell you what, I'll leave it up to you. He's testing her to see if she has management quality or whatever.
And that puts her in a position where she's like, I gotta be strong.
And she says, I'm sorry, we can't do that, but maybe we can point you to some other directions. And he goes, I would lose my house. I would lose everything. And he goes, you. And then she gets on her knees and starts to beg. And she goes like, I'm a proud Romanian woman. I have never begged. And he goes, but please. And she gets on her knees and starts to beg. And then eventually she tries to grab her hands and kiss her and kiss her hands. And she has like dentures in. And I think there's a couple of funny parts with that later or whatever. But eventually, also she steals her candy at her desk. When she's talking to the manager, she looks back over here and the woman goes like, and she kind of goes, she puts her in her purse. She's a very funny character. Whoever the actress was,
that might just been a really great actor moment right there. Just like do some business.
Yeah, it's really Sam
Raimi trusts his actors.
She's quite good. And then so she starts kind of making a scene. She grabs her dress. She's like, security, ah! And then she goes like, you shame me. You shame me. And so she gets up and they escort her from the thing, and the woman looks back at her and gives her the old, she has 2 different colored eyes. It's really creepy. It's a very on the nose character, but somehow he makes it both fun but inhuman. She's a person. She's gonna lose her house. And then
kind of subverts it a little bit, but
there's a big don't worry about it coming up. The lady, she walks home, and this lady has this handkerchief, and this weird clangety gypsy movie na 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 plays whenever she's around or whatever. And you see the handkerchief we saw her handkerchief when she was at the bank, and Allison is walking back to her car or whatever, and she sits in her car, and she sees like an old rickety car. It's like, is that the gypsy's car or whatever? Like, she's worried that this woman may try to do something because she gave her the old stink eye. And as she sits in her car, she sees the handkerchief come flying outside of the window or whatever, past her windshield, and it flies kind of around in a weird American Beauty way, and it flies till it's like behind. It flies behind her car, and she turns around, and the gypsy is in the back seat.
The Roma woman.
And she's the Roma woman. The Roma woman. I shouldn't say gypsy. It's kind of an offensive term. But and it's not like she's like, it's not a jump scare. She's sitting there in the darkness, and she just.
But she wasn't there before.
She just leans forward, and she just goes, "You shamed me."
Oh God.
And she attacks her for all intents and purposes or whatever, and it's not nice on the gypsy lady's part. She yanks her hair. She's and the woman has a weird horror sense of propriety. Like, she knows she's in a horror movie, so she does something in a weird horror way where she takes her teeth out but puts them back together wrong. So her bottom teeth are on top and the bottom, and they look all gross and
really selling it.
It's weird. It's weird. Like, but it works somehow. It's a big. Don't worry about it too much. If you kind of just go with the ride,
right. It's just a horror story. Yeah.
And then, so what happens is, they have this weird little fight in the car, and eventually she kicks the lady, and the lady slams. And there's something about the teeth. It comes back. I don't know what it is about it, but she slams her teeth on like the passenger side of the dashboard, and they go out of her face. And then Allison picks up a stapler, and she whaps, like, staples her on the head and staples her on her hand or whatever. It's like, oh, poor old lady. Like, she's a frail old woman.
Woman's jumping the gun.
That too. She's also getting like assaulted in her car. So it is what it is. Like, so eventually she manages
miscommunication.
They have a struggle, and she manages to get her door open and kick her out, shut it, lock it. And there's this weird moment of hubris from Alison Lohman. She goes, "I got you, you old bitch!" Like it's funny, but you also don't want the character to be this. She's a nice girl,
right? You don't want her to reveal that she's
kind
mean.
of a weirdly self-serving or whatever,
right? But this is a moral tale. So
is it though?
Well, I don't know. I've not seen
because the punishments never fit the crime in this movie.
That's kind of what I've heard. It's
so
gloriously
fun. Okay, and then so she can't get back in, the gypsy woman, and she looks down and she sees a button. Like, came off of her
blouse or whatever.
Her Allison's jacket. I don't know if her name's Allison. I can't remember what it is. And she smiles and she picks it up and she goes. It gets real trippy, slow mo, close up of her mouth, and like Slavic language, and you hear the word lamia. And then she goes, and she says, I can't remember what she says, but she says something like, you shamed me, like, but now you will seek me out. And she gives her the button back or whatever, or leaves the button on the ground or whatever, or something like that, and she just walks away. Allison, I think this night actually, she calls the police or whatever and tells what happened. Justin Long shows up, comforts her, and on the way home we meet, I can't remember his name, but he's from Inception. He's the Indian guy with the kind of poofy curly hair who gives them their sedative, and he kind of goes in with them. He's in Avatar. He's been in a couple things. He's a great supporting actor. And they're on their way home. They got some coffee or something, and they're walking down the street, and she sees she feels like a presence following her. She feels, in a big rush of wind and leaves just kind of comes whirling at her, and she feels a deep sense of unease. And as they're walking down, she sees a psychic, like a generic, I don't know,
medium.
But it's like one of a cheesy one with like tarot cards and like, come get your fortune or whatever.
Yeah,
it's really like
that would be more considered a psychic than a medium.
Yeah,
like your mediums are like your Sylvia Brown. They come in to talk to spirits.
So he comes in,
a spiritualist.
So Justin Long, of course, is the cynic, and he's like, there's part of it. And he's like, I sense that you are a very wealthy man. Like, oh, did you get that from looking at my watch or the credit card I just paid you with? Like, it's very funny. He's very good.
Long line too.
Yeah, he's very good in the movie. But she really is concerned, so she wants her fortune read. And when it happens, he gets real serious about it, because he like reads her palm and stuff, and then does like cards and whatever, and she kind of looks deep at her, and he has a real quick, like Gandalf reaches down to pick up the ring, and then you get the eye of Sauron for half a second. You see one of those, and he goes, "Have you been playing with a Ouija board or have you of your friends insulted someone of the supernatural? And he goes, I sense a dark presence around you. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. And he goes, I think maybe someone has cursed you. And he goes, I'm sorry, I'll give you your money back, whatever. And the supernatural elements of this story start ramping up real quick.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah.
And there's a couple of real gross dream sequences that are funny. The first immediate one that happens is she dreams of the gypsy woman. Like she's lying in her bed and she rolls over and she sees the gypsy woman next to her. And the gypsy woman, I saw the behind the scenes and what a trooper Allison is. The gypsy woman gets on top of her and like growls at her. She looks kind of zombie-ish and she kind of vomits worms and bugs and cockroaches all over her face and her mouth, and it's real gross.
That's awesome.
And she did. That's a real shot in this movie. And I was like, "Good for you, sweetie." But it's just a dream. She wakes up, and then something happens as Justin Long leaves the house. Is she feels this? She feels the presence again, or whatever, and she feels that of this big creaky garden gate that's outside of their house, and things start whirling around in her house, and like she gets like hit by household items and stuff, and eventually
kind of a poltergeist sort of situation.
She gets so afraid she runs upstairs, and then what happens is she sees these big hooves under the door. Jump, jump. And it tries to open the door, and then I think Justin Long comes home or whatever. And she feels she's been cursed or whatever, and she knows that what it is the button. The gypsy cursed the button, and the button is hers. So she needs to go and get it done. She goes to the gypsy's house, begging her for forgiveness. The gypsy's dead. She died already. And during it, she gets. The gypsy, the body accidentally falls on her or something, and it her gummy mouth is like on her chin or whatever, and gross mucus and stuff is coming out. It's a weirdly gross movie.
I'll need to see it. I think I get an idea for it.
The best part of the movie is she's trying to stall her fate or whatever. And she goes back to the psychic or whatever, and he goes her and you've been cursed by something called the Lamia. And it's an ancient goat demon from Slavic folklore or whatever.
Right, the Eastern European.
When someone has offended you, you curse an object that belongs to a person, and whoever owns the object is after like 3 or 4 days, and he's flipping the pages of the book. The apparition gets stronger as it happens. First, it's just a presence, then it's a shadow, and then it's like a shadow with eyes and claws, and like a very. Then it's like it's here, and then it goes on the last page. You see the hands, like the person's hand, being dragged underground, and. That's the crux of the movie. She's dragging you to hell. Or whatever.
I love goat demons.
It is. And the best part of the movie comes when she goes to another psychic, the brother of the boy from the beginning of the movie, who has been sort of dedicating her life to like studying this thing and trying to save people for exorcisms and things like that. And they do a seance where they summon the Lamia to it, and it goes. I can't remember if it goes inside her or her manservant that she has helping, but I think both happens. And she goes into the manservant and makes him do a weird goat jig.
I love it.
It's real creepy, and like it has these big long eyes and this big giant smile or whatever. She sacrifices a kitty to try to like. Sometimes you can appease the demon with an animal sacrifice, and he vomits up her kitty back onto the table that she killed. It was really sad.
That is super Sam Raimi though. Yeah, it's like I just got done doing Spider-Man. I want to just do something gross. And
do you want me to like tell you how everything ends?
I think I know. Like I think that the ending of the movie is kind of infamous.
She gets dragged to hell.
Yeah, like it's kind of
but it's not. It's an accident or whatever. Because what happens is she realizes she tries to find loopholes or whatever, and she's like, like what if I burn the button? It's like, well, if you burn the button, you're still the owner of the button,
right? And
he goes, if you hate someone enough, you can give it to someone. So she gives it to the guy at her work, who's kind of a dick,
right?
Is like sucking up, and she tries to give it to him, but she can't do it. She's a nice person. Mm-hmm. She can't curse this man to damnation or whatever.
To goat demonry.
She eventually gives it to the gypsy lady or whatever. She digs up the grave and she's like, I, Allison Lohman, or whatever her character's name is, do hereby bequeath. Like, it's very like she's making it as formal as she can. Give this
Slavic
button.
lady.
And like, and even in death, this gypsy bitch still like does something gross to her and like yanks some of her hair out by accident because it's a rigor mortis corpse and gets some of her hair caught. And she gives her and she thinks it's over, but actually, she works at a bank and Justin Long loves coins. And she saves them for him and puts them in an envelope.
Oh, that's very specific.
An envelope got switched. And she pulls it out and he goes, I think you have my famous coin in the thing. And then she feels the Lamia's presence. And then she falls into the train tracks. Then like a train coming over. Justin Long's like, somebody help her. She's going to get run over. And he sees as these things come up, these hands come up and drag her down to hell. And he has tears in his eyes. And it's a really terrible, terrifying ending. And then the movie just ends with Justin Long like in horrible, traumatic shock. It's a real fucking good one. I don't want to. I've talked a little bit too long about it, probably like 2-3 minutes over, but I should. But it's a good one. Definitely, I think you'll notice a lot of mine are like kind of fun, cheesy ones that are kind of a little more. They're not high cinema, but they're a lot of fun.
Well, it made me think about this, since I think we should do like one more each, or just one more with this. Is what about a horror movie, a movie that isn't a horror movie, does not involve the supernatural or creatures or anything, just a typical story that you would say comes close to a horror movie? Because I've got a couple in mind. Funny enough, they're both based on a novel by the same author.
Okay. Is it Stephen King?
No, it's not Stephen King.
You could look at a movie like Misery. I think is a horror movie.
Or
what are some really
Sounds
good
of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs is one of the best ever.
Silence of the Lambs, I think, is more of a thriller. But like, I don't want to get into the.
I think a lot of people give it the moniker of a horror movie and give Jonathan Demme the credit of making a horror movie because it won the Best Picture. And it's like, finally, a horror movie wins Best Picture.
Yeah.
And it's gruesome enough and scary enough to make it work.
I remember the part where he peels his face off in the ambulance. Like, oh shit, it's Hannibal Lecter. Like that's pretty good.
That whole escape sequence is 10 out of 10. That's pure cinema. Yeah. That's one of the greatest sequences of all
Jonathan
time.
Demme never went back to that. It was such a huge thing for him.
Jonathan Demme had a pretty solid career.
No, he did, but he never went back to that character.
No.
After that, it was Ridley Scott and Brett Ratner.
Diminishing returns.
And the guy who did, well, then there was the Hannibal Rising one, which I didn't hate too much.
Gaspar
Ulliel or whatever. He plays young Hannibal Lecter or whatever. Comes back in the show, kind of. He talks about, did you have a sister? Like, yeah, I did. Her name was Misha or whatever.
And she got eaten by Nazis.
Well, he doesn't say that. The Hannibal in the show doesn't ever tell you anything. He doesn't need to. But
they try to make that whole thing with him and that Japanese woman like canon and everything. And I don't know. I only watched the first 2 seasons of Hannibal. They were both great. Yeah, because Mads Mikkelsen is otherworldly, and that almost verges on supernatural in that series.
Yeah, it's just the cerebralness of it all.
It's that Brian Fuller filmmaking in there.
Yeah, David Slade, which reminds me of another one I got to get to in a second. I don't know what it is. I think I love something about the supernatural because you feel like you have a little more possibility.
Well, I love ghost stories. Don't get me wrong. I love that stuff. But
I would say Us is kind of a horror. I mean, it's not supernatural. It's clones. Is that
and with Jordan Peele, I mean, aside from Get Out isn't supernatural.
No,
it's all psychological.
It's slightly outside of reality as far as like what's possible with science, but it's in the realm of possibility.
Right, and there's nothing else we could say about Jordan Peele. Those 2 movies are excellent.
Yeah,
Get Out.
I think as I rewatched Get Out I watched it with my girlfriend because she hadn't seen it.
Wow.
And her mom hadn't seen it, and she's one of those people who hates horror movies because she doesn't like being scared or whatever. They watched it, and the first thing I noticed on a rewatch, it's just good. I don't know if it's scary. It's good.
He's able to do horror filmmaking. I just think he's like, I'd rather tell this story than that.
Us is scarier.
Yeah,
it's a more tense idea, and if it happened to you, you would be terrified.
And he knows how to make creepy. He's good at creepy.
Yeah. Just
you know.
people standing outside of your house ominously. It's
Right.
like I said, it's the Halloween thing. Like Halloween, to its credit, it just does it in broad daylight. Like then it still
Which I
somehow
love
makes
that.
it
I mean, that
scary.
goes back to talking about someone like Ari Aster,
Yeah.
who, in my opinion, doesn't even really need the supernatural to make something creepy. It
No.
just is a nice spice to put into your movie, especially with something like
I think it just
Hereditary.
gives you can have a better payoff because
Yeah.
something supernatural, you can have something outlandish happen, but in reality, like you're kind of limited by like, well, what's possible?
Well, going what I was saying, like
Yeah.
there was one of the ones that came to mind when I think of a movie that kind of gets under my skin a little bit is Gone Girl. Is David Fincher's Gone
That's a
Girl
good
based
one.
on the Gillian Flynn novel?
And again, I don't know. I don't know what it is about me. I don't think it's a horror movie, but
not
it's
a horror
damn
movie, but
good.
It's akin to something like American Psycho, or Psycho itself, where it's just about like the way he films it is very eerie.
Yeah.
The when it gets graphically violent, it gets graphically violent.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Rosamund Pike is so compelling and scary, and at the same time complex.
You realize she seems like a girl that liked her husband, and then she just turned. I don't know if I think it's one of those things like, are the signs always there? Was she always just a lunatic?
Well, it's a sliding scale of it's a movie that is worth analyzing because it's kind of like how you see it. It depicts a lot of how you feel about things.
I mean, I definitely see her as, I don't know what else there is to see
She's
about
one of the
it.
best villains in film history. Because
Also, kudos to Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Playing the ultimate befuddled, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like he's just like, his reaction to everything kind of sells that movie.
Well,
she's great.
She's great, but Ben Affleck being a natural like heel and just a natural kind of asshole in this movie.
Yeah.
Well, he's not kind of, he is. Means that everyone's kind of like, yeah, you're an asshole, dude. And
Yeah.
she's like, I know. That's why I'm getting him this close to being executed.
Yeah.
But the other one that came to mind is also based in a Gillian Flynn novel, and it's
What did you think of? Sorry, little addendum. What did you think of Fincher's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
it's good. It's good.
I did too. I thought it was right.
I actually like it a lot more than the
new one.
Scandinavian ones.
Really?
With was it Runa?
Rooney Mara?
No, Rooney Mara played
No, that's
the
the
one.
other one. It's Numi
Rapace?
Rapace or Rapace or whatever.
Yeah, from Prometheus.
Yeah.
She's great. Which, by the way, Rumi Rapace is awesome, or Numi whatever.
You're right.
But yeah, Rooney Mara is really great.
I was just curious. Some people don't like that one, but I actually kind of like it.
I'm
And
such a sucker
it's-
for Fincher's style that I'm like, I wish he would well, that goes back to talk about Seven. Like Seven, a lot of people consider a horror movie, and I would
Seven
agree.
is definitely a horror movie.
But that's another one where the supernatural is not part of it, other than just like, if you can believe, like particularly with the man that he
Kept alive,
that kept
or the
alive for sloth
or whatever.
and it's like, no, dude, no. But that scene when they go in and Arlie Emery, rest his soul, leans in there and just like, they got you, you piece of shit. And he just goes, ah! Everyone shits their pants.
Yeah.
Like it's great.
How would you bring that guy back to life? Like his eyes are so much like his eyes were so like deprived, like he was like turn on the lights and you blind him. Like how would you, if you're a medical professional, how do you even bring him back? The one that fucked me up was the man at the sex club.
Yeah,
And he has the phallus
lust.
with the blade on it, for lack of a better word. Like that's just, it shudders to think that could be real, and I think that's what makes it so scary. Is that
Right.
could there be someone like that out there?
And that's another movie where its story and all its imagery is so powerful, but at the same time, you got two incredible performances bouncing off one another.
There are some other horror movies that I think that aren't supernatural but are terrifying. One of which is by, what's his name? It's the guy who did Ichi the Killers, Takashi Miike.
Takashi Miike. Are you talking about Audition?
Yes.
Yeah, Audition's something else.
It'll ruin your day.
Audition is one of the feel-good movies of the year. But when Audition came out and started making its cult following in the early 2000s, there are people like, that's the scariest movie ever made, bar none. Like the scariest movie ever made. And Miyake and a lot of Japanese horror, not specifically.
He is unique among Japanese horror.
Well, he's
where
also
he's
not
like
just a horror director.
Oh no,
Like,
no, he's done a lot of
like,
stuff. I think I mentioned he did 13
13
Assassins or 13 Samurai. That's a great movie. It has some horror ish feels to it, where the guy they're going after to kill is just a lunatic who just chops people's limbs off and leaves them as stump people. Like, it's horrible.
Right. It's those elements that he likes, or even like his adaptation.
But it's just
like,
a fun movie
of like Zatoichi or something, where he just loves gore and all that. Which, I mean, hey, go for it.
He's also he's in fantasy and he's in comedies too. Like that guy's he's like
an actor.
He's
too.
a Spielberg of Japanese movie work.
A gore Spielberg, kind of like a Raimi. You know, because even there are moments in like Spider-Man, like the way Dafoe plays Green Goblin, plays Norman.
It's very.
Have you seen the original design for the mask?
Yeah, it was like a weird sort of Power Rangers-y.
Well,
It was an animatronic face.
Yeah, it was an animatronic rubber mask, and they were just like, it's too scary. And I'm like, I want to be in that world where that
I just want to live in a world where they make him have a goblin face.
Yeah,
not even like a robot, just like cool prosthetic makeup.
Make him look like the one from the Broadway show.
You can sprinkle some CGI in if you want to smooth it out or whatever, but like just a real face would be fine.
But anyway. The audition definitely. But the other one that came to mind for me was HBO did a mini series based on Gillian Flynn's first novel, Sharp Objects, and Sharp Objects. It's Amy Adams. She's a reporter. She's like an investigative reporter.
I remember this. I never saw it though.
She goes back to her hometown in like southern Missouri, and it's completely like this like deeply tight, conservative, idealized southern town. But young girls are getting killed, and she's like, well, I have to go back, and she's had horrible addiction problems, self-harm problems, things like this, and she's like, I have to go back to my mother and my young sister. And what unfolds is just this legitimately upsetting, creepy, more in tune with like how the first season of True Detective is a horror.
Yeah.
But the director, who's a French director, I don't recall their name. They also worked on Pretty Little not Pretty Little Liars, but the other show, Little Lie, Big Lies, the other HBO show. You know what I'm talking about. That guy should drew horror, because there are sequences in that series as the mystery unfolds, as the past with Amy Adams' character. Her younger version is played by the girl from It.
Yeah, I know.
And so there's like these back and forths to like the trauma that happened when they were young, and their dream sequences and moments that are so frightening and so like unsettling, and then the twists and reveals. I walked out of it being like, that might be one of HBO's best limited series, and it might be one of the better horror movies I've seen in years, while not being a horror movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of those horror, but is it? Like,
yeah,
Bong Joon-ho is a horror, but is it? Director. I mean,
I've not seen Mother or it's been a long time since
by
I saw
Darren Aronofsky.
Host. Man, I will say to this day with Aronofsky.
You're talking about his Mother, or
no,
Bong Joon-ho
Bong Joon-ho did a movie called Mother.
Oh, okay.
But Mother,
I haven't seen it.
Darren Aronofsky movie is one of the movies that after it was over, I felt so nauseous. Like, that got me really rough. I don't know if it's scary, but if you have any fear,
it's gross. But
it's gross. It's claustrophobic. It got hated. People hated that movie. Had a visceral response, and I think it might be one of his more effective movies.
I have it downstairs. Don't spoil it for me.
I mean, what could I spoil? Like, it doesn't really have a narrative. It just kind of goes.
It's about
nuts.
The Bible, is what everyone says essentially.
I guess it's about. You watch it, you see what it's about.
I hear like it's a metaphor. Like Javier Bardem's character is God creating the earth. And
there's a lot of destructive elements and a lot to do with a washing machine or a sink.
There's a lot of people out there that I'm like, you can say like, they create something so scary without dealing with horror subject matter at all. Kari Joji Fukunaga is one of those guys.
Like I said,
even like Beasts of No Nation. Even if you watch that, like, it's not a scary movie, but there's plenty of parts of it I'm like, he would do a great horror movie.
Or someone like
he was gonna do It, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, he was gonna do It from Andy Muschietti. Muschietti got it. A director who did one of the horror movie I really love talking about before, Rosemary's Baby, Roman Polanski, a legitimate monster.
Yeah.
But if you watch a movie like even Chinatown, which is just this very kind of straightforward noir, it has moments that are horror. They have jump scares. There's this feeling of menace. John Huston's character, the villain, the big bad behind it all, is a psychopath, one of cinema's greatest villains, and he almost has this power that is a monster. and it ends so tragically, and it's like, yeah, no, this is a movie made by a horror filmmaker.
Yeah.
Like,
we should probably talk about like Old Boy. Kind of has some
Old
of that.
Boy gets into that.
A lot of Korean
Tale
filmmakers.
of Two Sisters is one that kind of came out around the same time, or I keep saying turn of the century. You know what I mean? The early 2000s.
It is technically the turn of a century.
It is the turn of the century.
With a lot of Korean people that we should probably talk about. I don't know all their names because I suffer from American elitism, where I remember American filmmakers
you were
immediately.
Talking about I Saw the Devil.
Yes, I was just about to bring that up.
Seen I Saw the Devil.
Not. It is a horror movie in the sense that
Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wook did Old Boy.
Old Boy.
And
it's another
Sympathy
guy.
for Lady Vengeance.
Yeah, it's another man.
Yeah.
I Saw the Devil, by the way, worth every second of the watch. It's by no means an easy watch. It's gross, it's sexually perverse at times, and it is uber violent. There's a taxi murder scene where the serial killer, I've given you sort of the rough idea. It's basically about a serial killer who makes the mistake of killing the lover of a ruthless assassin who works for the Korean government. And he just dedicates his life to hunting this man down and beating the shit out of him just before the point of death, letting you go to the hospital, heal yourself up, and then I'm going to keep doing it again. And it's watching a serial killer just be like, why is he doing this to me?
I'm out of my league.
And like the number of times that him and his other weird serial killer gross friends try to help him, and just the guy is a juggernaut. It's a great action movie. It's a great it's a great sort of study about tragedy and grief, and how maybe the secret agent man isn't that much better than the serial killer. The only thing that's better, the only thing that was better is the fact that he's just is like, you let the dog off the leash a little bit. Well, and like there's it's about like, humanity and violence, and people that like violence find a way to do it regardless. But there is a scene. It's a really great scene, but it's horrifying to watch, even though it's not particularly shot. There's a cool panorama shot, but it's not shot in a way that's overly tense. It's more like tense in a Tarantino way, where it's almost a little fun. Where the serial killer, I think after he's had the shit beat out of him by the secret agent one time, he's like hobbling his way back to some city, and he flags down a taxi, and there's two men in the taxi, and they say something to him that just I think that just like makes him snap.
I think I've seen this a gif of this scene.
He just stabs
him. And it's like the camera just stays on the front of the car, and you just see it just happening.
And it kind of goes around, and the guy driving is trying to fight him off as he just gets brutally stabbed to death.
Yeah,
I think it's if I'm not mistaken, it's also the father. I think it's the father from Parasite.
Parasite? Yeah, I think it is that guy.
I think he's the serial killer, if I'm not mistaken. But it's just like that's got to be what a brutal stabbing. Like you feel, I don't even know, hopeless, horribly wounded, sad, uncomfortable. Like it's all of those things. It's like it's a terrible way to go.
Yeah.
And it's a frightening way to go until he goes out to the back of the car, I think, opens up the trunk, and there's a dead body in it. They were serial killers too. Or something like that. Like you're kind of just like, what? Like this movie.
It's just a deep dive into depravity.
It is, and like when they find the secret agent's girlfriend's body, it's just cut up into pieces, and
check it out.
it's pretty brutal, but like some of the action is quite fun, if I say so myself.
Similarly, Ben Wheatley, who's an English director, did a movie called Kill List.
I've heard of this. I've never seen it though.
Kill List has a very similar vibe. Essentially, Neil Maskell is him and his buddy, who's an actor who I don't remember. He's been in a ton of stuff. He's really great. Were a part of like SAS. They were British operatives, and they were involved in some crazy thing that happened in like the Ukraine.
Yeah. And
now, like, they're kind of on wits' end about things. They're running out of money, and it's like, let's take jobs again. I got a contract, and the shady group comes together and says, "Hey, we want you to go kill these people.
Yeah,
go kill like a video producer, a priest, and a PM, and like a government minister.
Yeah,
and they're like, all right, sure. And as they do it, it unravels this mystery where they're just like, I've been waiting for you. Thank you. And it's just the levels of violence are so horrific and just so, and eventually it leads up into this shocking ending where it becomes a cult horror.
I want to talk about maybe one or two more, but I want to ask something about violence.
Yeah. Well,
there's a lot.
Real quick, one more movie, because one more director that fits very similar into all this is David Lynch.
Okay.
David Lynch
haven't seen many of his movies.
Can turn movies. Almost all of his movies have a level in their surreality and their lynchiness of horror. Blue Velvet comes to mind. Blue Velvet is technically a crime thriller, but Blue Velvet is also about.
That's the one about the guy who's trying to get revenge. It's the guy from Green Room, isn't it? Or am I thinking of something else?
You're thinking of Blue Ruin.
Blue Ruin,
That's a different director.
Different blues.
This is from 1980s. This was David Lynch's movie after he finished Dune and got the money from Dune. And it's Kyle MacLachlan plays like a goody two-shoes nice boy, and his girlfriend is Laura Dern. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm a chipper boy in the nice little idyllic Midwestern town. And he finds a rotten, a rotten ear. And he starts following down this mystery about this lusty musician woman, this singer at a bar, and it leads him into the world of one of cinema's other great villains, Frank Booth, played by Dennis Hopper, who is this crime lord who sort of is involved in all the evil dealings that are behind this town, and he is just this disgusting, perverse, almost vaguely inhuman monster. And Jeffrey Beaumont, this poor, sweet boy, gets dragged into this world of sin and has to get himself out of it one way or the other. And it's so disturbing. And it's one of Lynch's most brutal.
It sounds good. I should check out more David Lynch.
Blue Velvet's a good one to get into, but much like you were talking about some of these that just have these levels of sadomasochism and everything, this is one like that. I think Roger Ebert, when it first came out, hated it, and he said, this movie is just pornographic. And nowadays, most people look at it and say, no, it was kind of like a neo-noir masterpiece.
Yeah. I want to, getting back to that, to talk about like sadomasochism and violence. What is it about some movies that are real gory that do nothing for us, but a movie like I Saw the Devil with that taxi scene can make you be like,
I think
like so uncomfortable.
I think it's the difference that I've said a lot in my life growing up was like the two comparisons I had was Kill Bill and Saving Private Ryan. In Kill Bill, when you watch Uma Thurman slice up a whole room full of wannabe samurais.
It's fun.
It's not violent. It's just gory because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan is
the
another
opening
one
part of Saving Private Ryan
day.
Is so violent and horrific that you feel it in your gut because it's close to reality. There's a difference between the intimacy of violence and just the gratuitousness of gore.
I would also argue that's not even the worst part of Saving Private Ryan. Giovanni Ribisi's death is way worse.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, and what's the guy's name? Is it Evan? Not Evan Goldberg. Something.
Adam Goldberg.
Adam Goldberg. Yeah. He gets like slowly stabbed to death.
Yeah.
I remember watching that. I had a nightmare about that for a while.
Saving Private Ryan is one of America, that the American canon is also one of the most violent movies ever made.
It is. It's brutally violent.
It's America's great director Steven Spielberg. Like, hey, World War II wasn't fun, guys.
World War II sucked.
Yeah,
and you watch your movies like The Green Berets with John Wayne or whatever. It's a joke.
Or The Longest Day, where it's like hell of a war, and then it's like, no, here's what really happened. People were just machine gunned in half.
Yeah,
it sucked, y'all.
It was awful. Yeah.
Yeah, and yet in high school classes all over, we get to watch the D-Day invasion sequence every year.
Yeah, but yeah, I still argue that's the least violent. I say the least violent. It's not the least violent thing I've ever seen in that movie, but it's. I think what happens later. It shows you how fragile like a human body can be. Mm-hmm. Like Giovanni Ribisi, I think he just gets hit once, but he gets hit right in the gut, and it's just over. And he dies horribly, whimpering for his mother to come save him.
Yeah,
it's just awful.
Well, you get a couple of those.
Also, low key should have got nominated for something. He's great in that
Ribisi.
movie. Yeah. There's the scene where he's having a meltdown. There's the scene where he talks about how his mom and how he used to pretend to be asleep so he wouldn't have to talk to his mom. and then and now all he wishes is that he could just talk to her, and that he could just talk to her just one more time or whatever, and he just cries, and it's a great scene, and I feel like he gets slept on because he's I think he's a Scientologist or some shit. It's
also he was overblown in a cast full of all kinds of other people.
Yeah, Vin Diesel's in it. People forget
for a minute. He's
and sniped immediately. That sniper death is horrible as well. It's right through his eye, but
horrible, really cool.
It's one of the. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm just oh god, but the other two deaths they're real bad.
So I think when you talk about violence and things, it's all about the intimacy. There's a sequence when I showed that movie to some of my friends, talking about Kill List, going back to Kill List. There's a sequence where Neil Maskell, one of the assassins, finds out what the videographer does, which is essentially
child porn.
Yes, essentially you just know that he has horrible levels of smut and illegal smut and everything, and he just takes a hammer and goes into the kitchen where the guy is and just starts slamming the hammer on the guy's hand. And
I think I've seen this scene.
Yeah, and there's no the camera doesn't cut away. It's very clearly either they had a prosthetic hand there or obviously a plastic hammer, but he just as the guy's screaming, and my friends turned to me and said, "What the fuck, Matt? This movie's awful." And I was just yeah, it's really brutal, and that is more violent.
I think it's because it's the idea of I think in a lot of ways bloody deaths are less terrible than a bludgeoning death. Because the idea of a blunt force, like a baseball bat to the top of your head, you feel right now you can feel the pressure of that is more uncomfortable than
in The Walking Dead when Negan kills what's his name to kill
Glenn. He kills Glenn and he kills Abraham.
Is so traumatic for a lot of people is because he takes a bat to him,
and it takes a long while. It's the idea that I think suffering and a longevity and bluntness is worse.
Not everybody has been shot, not everybody has been stabbed, but everybody has stubbed their toe.
Everyone has smashed their shin on a stair or something. Yeah,
so they know what they get an empathetic idea of if you took that pain and put it up to your forehead.
Yeah. Do you think that because a hand through your machete undoubtedly hurts, but it's over.
Yeah,
and you
get it. That's when
it's
you
quick
get
and clean
stuff the only God forgives.
Yeah. But so when he bashes his hand with the hammer, does he try to yank his hand back, or does he keep it there with his hand?
Too late. I think it's too late at that point, if I recall. And I think it goes through his knees too. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah. Drive has a scene like that.
Yeah,
where I think it's. What's his name? Ryan Gosling, where he just comes in and
he's got that hammer.
He's got the hammer, and he breaks his hand and his elbow just so he can. And then he
puts
calls
the bullet up to his face and holds the hammer up. If he sends it down, that bullet's going right into him.
And then he has the tense phone call with Ron Perlman or whatever, and he's like, "You haven't done this before, have you?" What do you want? And he goes, "Out of it," or whatever.
When Ron Perlman slices Bryan Cranston's wrist
so quick,
it looks so painful.
No,
but
it's
Albert
Brooks. Yeah,
Albert Brooks comes in, slices it, and he's just "Hey, it's over. It's over. It's over. It's over." And it's your gut drops because
I actually yes, but I think that's a better way to go than hammer to the.
Well, certainly, yeah. But
if we're choosing horrible ways to die,
but there are certain films where, going back to us talking about slasher movies, where you're there for the ridiculousness of violence.
Yeah, but I don't feel a sense of oh no, or even the sense
care.
of the sinking feeling in your stomach.
But you do care when the film wants you to care about the violence. When you want to feel
I guess it just comes down
connected.
to filmmaking, I guess.
Yeah.
I have one more I want to talk about. Maybe you can wrap up with one too. This is a movie that we talk about movies that are almost good. This is a movie that almost is a great horror movie, and then it just kind of drops out. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called 30 Days of Night.
Oh yeah, it's a vampire movie.
It's based off of a
novel.
graphic
Josh
novels.
Hartnett, it's set in Alaska,
and it's based off of a director I quite like named David Slade, he's a showrunner on Hannibal.
Yeah,
and
David
directed
Slade.
a bunch of
I
great
didn't know
episodes.
he directed it.
Yeah, he also did Twilight and some stuff, but can be forgiven. That's a great movie, just from the beautiful shots in it, like the opening shot of Ben Foster, who gives a wonderfully scene-chewing performance as the man, the out-of-town gross stranger who wanders into his jobs. Do you know what it's about, right? It's a 30 Days of Night. It's a town in Alaska where it doesn't have daylight for 30 days.
It's the opposite of the Midsummer thing, where it's
Iceland.
There's certain
where it's almost midnight and it just looks like sunset or whatever. But Yeah, and everyone gets
So
out
it's
of the
ideal for these vampires.
Yes, and the graphic novel is a little different, where the vampires speak, whereas here they have this brutish Slavic kind of guttural language they talk to each other in.
I remember the trailer, and they're just like, "Oh my god!" He's like, "No god,
no god," or whatever. It's Danny Houston or Huston.
Danny Houston. Danny Houston.
Yeah, and Charlie is. No, it's Ben Foster. I'm thinking of Charlie Prince from 3:10 to Yuma, which is another Ben Foster role.
And it's Josh Hartnett during that little rise of Josh Hartnett before we crashed on poor Josh Hartnett.
Yeah, whatever happened to him, man?
He was in
Penny Dreadful.
Penny Dreadful.
Good stuff,
yeah,
man.
He still acts. He's fine.
But
it's just he was an A-lister.
So they send Ben. There's this. The opening shot is Ben Foster looking out hopelessly at this big Alaskan wilderness. It's a real cool shot, looking at this big abandoned ship, this big oil tanker. It's how the vampires get around. They travel on this oil tanker.
Luke is here.
Okay, tell him I'm.
Kids are losing their minds.
Okay, tell him I'm wrapping up the podcast. So what happens is the vampires keep Ben Foster around like a little lab dog or whatever to go to town.
A Renfield.
Yeah, to go down, and they send him in to prepare the town for their arrival, particularly an isolated town. So what Ben Foster does is he destroys dismantles the helicopter that they have out there, kills the sled dogs, gets all the satellite phones.
He kind of kind of comes in and things them.
Kind of, yeah. And then Josh Hartnett is sent in, like this guy's causing a scene, so Josh Hartnett kind of beats the shit out of him and puts him in jail because he's the sheriff.
He's the sheriff, right? Yeah.
And then he's like, there's a part where some stuff starts happening around the town, and he thinks that Ben Foster has something to do with, and Ben Foster's drooling because he's all scared and wimpy or whatever, and he just goes, "I don't talk to dead men" or whatever, and because he doesn't know what's coming, and then the vampires show up. It's this very cool ominous force, and as town, it's like the opening of Dawn of the Dead or something, the Zack Snyder version, where just the apocalypse hits and you're like, what's happening, and it just goes. Like the vampires attack, and like they're these brutal. I actually even want to show you a picture of one of them because it's a really cool design.
I've seen what the look is, and it's very striking.
Hey, hold on one second.
They're a little more bestial than a lot of other vampires you get. You get that idea of, you get everything from your Nosferatu, like rat-like creatures, and then your aristocratic Dracula-like, and then these are almost just a force of nature. They're almost zombie-like, like I Am Legend.
Yeah, this one right here.
Yeah.
Particularly.
Yeah.
Really interesting designs. I remember really liking, like, it has this great sense of impending doom. And then, like, once the 30 days of nights hit, it's like Jews in the Holocaust. They're just like, be quiet, wait for the sun. Maybe they won't get us. And it gets kind of boring. Once the sun is out, it's real scary. like it's real scary. And there's a scene where one of them gets separated from the group, but they have to go from one house to the other very quietly or whatever. And like she gets separated, and these vampires just converge on her, and she lets out a terrifying scream, and then she's just gone. And it's just eerie silence. It's really good, but it gets kind of boring watching people like eat Oreos in a house quietly or stuff.
It's kind of how I felt about something like The Quiet Place.
Yeah, a strong start. I think it even has a cool ending because the way they beat the vampires is Josh Hart also has a really tragic, grim ending. Like Josh Hartnett chooses to infect himself with vampire blood so he can fight against them, and he kills Danny Houston in a fight, like as a vampire. It's kind of weird, but it works. But he still maintains some of his humanity before he's completely like become a vampire. And as the last day of he holds I can't remember the name. I think it's like Michelle something. It plays his they've had an on again off again relationship or whatever, and he doesn't want to live like this because it's terrible. And he just hugs her as the sun comes up, and he screams in agony. He doesn't disintegrate; he turns into like a charred corpse.
Right.
And she just holds him, and it's a really great ending. It's a really cool ending. It looks cool, interesting visual effects, and like it's a real agonizing way to go. It's a very tragic hero kind of thing. I dig it. I just wish the beginning and the middle was as good as the beginning and the end were.
I got one more. We'll wrap it up super quick. I talk about this movie all the time. This won't take long, and it is the 1999 House on Haunted Hill remake by William Malone.
This is not
The Haunting.
of Hill House. This is not the same thing.
The Haunting of the House on Haunted Hill is a remake of the Vincent Price movie, where Vincent Price's character invites a bunch of people to a mansion, a haunted mansion, and says, if you survive the night, you all get $1 million. And whoever,
you mean you will get $1 million?
You will get $1 million. And so in that movie, it's very clear he's getting revenge against his wife and doing all this other stuff. In House on Haunted Hill, it is set in an asylum in California where a horrible massacre took place. Great setting, great everything built up. And then all these people, this ensemble cast, Taye Diggs, Peter Gallagher, all these other people get called in, to Elisa Loeb, the singer, all get called in to...
They're paranormal researchers.
No, they're not.
Oh, they're not?
They're just people.
Okay.
And there is a conspiracy, but they're not paranormal researchers. It's not The Haunting. Okay. They're all just sent in to say, hey, if you survive my birthday, and it's, oh, God, it's Jeffrey. It's not Jeffrey Wright. What's his name? Jeffrey Rush. It's Jeffrey Rush.
Oh, yeah.
Jeffrey Rush and Famke Janssen are married couple. He's like a circus, like amusement park connoisseur and millionaire, and he's just this scumbag, and I love it. And they hate each other. Yeah. Him and Famke Janssen, they have this like antagonistic, like, oh, you're such a prick, and you're such a whore, and it's just very clear, like, oh, I'm gonna kill you, and everyone else just like, we don't know what we're doing here. And she confronts him and is like, did you change the guest list? He's like, no, the house did, I guess. And Chris Kattan from SNL is the son of the former owner, and he's like, we got to get out of here. This house is alive, and it's going to eat us all.
Wait, so they're bringing in people to pretend to be ghosts or some shit?
No.
Are you saying? Okay.
He had built Jeffrey Rush's character, Stephen Price, made a guest list for her birthday party. Okay. He was planning to have her killed in order to get, because he hates her, and she's having an affair.
All right, I get it now.
And the supernatural elements changed the guest list and sent in all these strangers. So everyone doesn't know what they're doing there. He thinks she's involved. She thinks he's involved. And then the house shuts down. And the house is an ancient old asylum. This is one of the best parts of the movie is the setting.
What year did this come out?
99.
Okay, that's relatively recent.
You could tell by the soundtrack. It's all Marilyn Manson. It's all cheesy. It's all like, and the set design alone makes this movie worth it. It is aware it's not a great movie. It is cheesy and over the top and scene chewing, and it is fabulous every step of the way. And essentially, unlike the original, where you're just like, oh, is just like fake ghosts? Nope. There's real ghosts, and they are horrible monstrosities with a shaking head gimmick. Like there will be just like an entity at the end of a hallway going like, and then it runs up and it has no eyes and a big mouth, and there's all this like nightmarish imagery, and these people just get picked off one by one, and they're trying to solve the mystery of what's going on and who's involved with what, and it just gets so gory and ridiculous, and but the two main actors, Famke Janssen and Jeffrey Rush, are putting on these wonderful, cheesy, scene-stealing performances. What makes it not great is that William Malone wanted to do so much more with it. And the studio got in the way and said, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this, and then add a big, giant CGI, essentially a giant Rorschach ink blot ghost at the end of the movie. And he's like, it got taken away from him and re-edited.
He got Zack Snyder.
He got kind of Snydered a little bit. He
got David Ayer.
He got David Ayer. He filmed the whole thing, and he's just like, they took away my movie, and it kind of pulled his career away from him. Oh. And the middle half of the movie is kind of boring, but and I love Taye Diggs, but he's kind of not into it in this movie.
Yeah.
I think it's Ali Larter plays the lead. Ali Larter plays the lead. It's very 90s. And they're both kind of the most boring part of the movie. Everyone else is on a 10. Chris Kattan is amazing in it. He's sitting through the whole movie after the place shuts down, drinking all the booze he can. He's just, every time someone's like, why don't you figure out what to do? He's like, you don't get it. This house is pissed, and it's going to rip us all into pieces. So I'm going to get drunk and try to get laid because I'm going to die tonight, and all of you are too. And it is one of the ultimate Halloween movies. It's cheesy, it's great, it's violent, it's ridiculous, and I love it to death, and I've loved it, and I stand this movie hard, even though it is far from perfect. And that's House on Haunted Hill.
I'll wrap up by talking about, just for a few minutes, because there's actually not a lot I can say about it, because it's kind of perfect. The Thing.
The Thing.
It's
The Thing.
kind of my. I waffle back and forth. I think it's my favorite horror movie.
Man, it is you couldn't get better than it.
And I think it's a combination of like one. Yes, we could go all day about the creature designs. I think the creature designs are not what make this movie good. I think what makes the movie good is performances and atmosphere.
You got a whole cast where almost everybody
The
has
incomparable
a certain,
Keith David.
Yeah, the great Wilford Brimley.
Yeah.
Like everybody in it is so iconic in these roles, and like everyone's so unique, and the mystery and the way Carpenter films it, and what you see and what you don't see. Is all and it still shocks you. Like there will be moments of silence.
My uncle showed me this movie when I was like 12 years old. He's like, I was like, have you ever seen this? And he was like, dude.
Yeah.
He got the DVD and he was like, your life's gonna change today. I think he's right. Like
Yeah.
it's about as I think it's better than most horror movies, and I'll include like the Hereditaries and stuff. I think it's a damn like what Terminator 2 is for great action movies.
This is for great.
This is for great science fiction-y horror movies.
And very similar to talking about something like Alien versus this. Alien is more kind of like Halloween. Like it's this legendary legacy thing, but it's a bit more slow, methodical, and kind of predictable now.
Yeah.
It's still amazing and still awesome to all
But
get
the
out.
thing-
But it's not as The Thing is so balls out that
and it's not
it's
slow
eternal.
and doesn't take its long time.
No.
And just even like the way it sets it up, just like looking back at it now, I watched the movie and I'm more scared of things than I am the first time I did. Like the dog that they're trying to shoot,
Yeah.
because they know what the fuck it is.
And,
Like,
and that poor Swede just drops that grenade and blows himself up. Oops.
yeah, like, and it's just like, God, like there's like I love a good setup. I love a good atmosphere. I love a good sort of setting, priming your environment.
What Carpenter does is
about
get
to
you
happen.
so caught up in the human drama that when the alien thing shows up, you're not expecting it.
Yeah.
Like when the one guy has a heart attack and they wheel him in and everyone's arguing back and forth with one another and Doc's doing the defibrillators and his chest opens up with teeth and bites his arms off.
Yeah.
That comes from out of nowhere.
I love also like
So awesome.
another good thing that more horror movies should take from it is the characters aren't idiots.
No.
They're well, they have to be professionals because they live in like fucking Antarctica.
Yeah, they're all there
But
because they're all experts at something.
Yeah, but when Kurt Russell does the blood test and he goes like to test people, like he's thinking like a viewer of a horror movie. Like you need to be smart, you need to know exactly what you need to do. Like and
Only one of you could have gotten into that blood.
and then he does it, and then the guy when they're all sitting
Now I'm
next
going
to
to find out what I already know.
Yeah.
You just
And
sit there, there's a crock of shit.
Yeah, and when they're sitting next to the dude as he starts thinking out, they're like, "Get us the fuck away from me!"
The guy who plays Gary, I forgot what he says in my. He's like, I would really enjoy not having to spend the rest of this winter tied to a fucking couch.
But also, my uncle pointed out, I don't know if it's advertent or if it's like one of those like when I talk about like Zack Snyder stands on the internet, how they read too much into every little thing he drops on whatever.
I think I know what you're talking
He's talking
about.
like there's the vodka bottle.
Yeah.
That they bring. I forget his name. The doctor or whatever.
That Wilford Brimley brings.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because the thing is shown to not programmed. It's in its instincts to avoid things that hurt itself, essentially, because alcohol kills brain cells.
Right.
So it does not drink alcohol. So it in the same way as the blood runs away from that, it's going to stay away from things that could potentially kill it because its goal is to survive.
Which doesn't mention alcohol in the movie, but it can be assumed that. I've heard a different tell on this, but
so like at the end of the movie when it is Keith David
when it's just
and Kurt Russell left.
Right, when it-
also very bleak ending.
yeah,
How long till that
maybe
fire
we'll
goes
just
out?
stay here for a while, see what happens.
Yeah, it's fucking
Yeah, but that's it because you got to stop it. And Keith David Childs takes a drink out of that bottle, and you see Kurt Russell kind of go,
relax.
huh.
Good.
I've heard interpretations where that bottle's supposed to be full of kerosene, and that when Keith David drinks it, that's when he realizes that's not a human. Because the original ending of the movie and the original script is Kurt Russell has the flamethrower under his jacket, and he's like, Childs is it, and he blows him away, and he's right, and then he chooses to freeze to death.
That's better. The one of
It's
the
better
movie, the one of the
ambiguous.
movie is better.
Yeah. It kind of is like, it goes back to like the Blade Runner thing of, is Deckard a replicant?
Doesn't matter.
The movie ends with, is Childs the thing?
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter, but you could choose to believe either way, and you get it
I
satisfying.
like also the soundtrack is so minimalist and bleak in itself. It's just like that just resounding
Neo
bass
Morricone
note.
did that.
Yeah, and it's just like we're just gonna die out here in the cold.
Dum, dum.
No one's gonna know what we did. That's kind of, in a way, that's worse than
Well, it's also so brave. It's also so human to say,
it is.
like,
And it's
no one will ever know that we saved the world from the most horrifying thing that could possibly happen.
yeah, and like it's Kurt Russell at his most handsome.
Yeah.
The great
Looks
hair.
great.
Uh,
One of the best
and
lines.
he's not like a cheesy action hero.
No.
It's a real restrained kind of performance.
When he's sitting there and he's got the tape recorder and it's just telling everybody what happened, he's given up. Like, he's not given up entirely, but he's like, we're getting kind of crazy here. No one trusts each other. Signing off. Like, he's like, it's only a matter of time before we're all dead. But he's got that great moment when he's playing, very symbolic, playing the chess. And he beats the chess just by destroying it. He pours that belt of scotch into the thing and just, cheating bitch.
It's
So
great.
good.
It's a good movie,
Yeah,
man. It's
solid.
It's
10 out of 10.
definitely Carpenter's my favorite work that he's ever
too.
done, and it's probably one of my favorite horror movies. That still, I know it's kind of cliche, the hipsterism. It still holds up. It does. It not
Yeah, it
just
still
not,
holds
not
up.
just, but it doesn't just hold up because it's great animatronics and practical effects. It holds up because the gripping drama is still so tense.
It's an excellent suspense thriller, and,
Yeah.
and everybody's great in it, and it plays out, and you never get tired of watching it. I would say probably the weakest part of it is it rushes to the end.
Yeah, but
The,
I feel that that's
hour on is flawless, and then the ending kind of drags on
solid.
a little bit.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, about the
but
time
but
when
I
it
feel
turns
like
into the big
that's
thing.
I feel like that's true though. That's kind of how it would do.
Yeah.
I think the alien would realize we're last ditch efforts here, buddy.
Yeah.
We gotta kill this dude. I gotta get out of here.
When it turns into the big thing, and it's got like the rah on the side, and he just takes a dynamite. Yeah, well, fuck you too. Blows it up.
yeah.
Oh.
I have nothing left to say.
Yeah.
Some
We
of our
could talk
great,
about horror movies forever, but
Yeah.
that'll be enough for this Halloween.
comment below. Tell us what some of your favorite horror movies.
Absolutely, yeah.
Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Podbean, the free Podbean app, iTunes, and we will see you guys next time.
Take it easy, guys.